This is the moment that a lot of people in the tech world have been waiting for, right? The inevitable listing of Facebook. It's kind of going to change the way Facebook is viewed from what was once a startup, hard to believe, to now an established player.
Yes, and it looks like it's going to be quite an IPO. Certainly no shortage of buzz in the run-up to it. Unfortunately, there's been one black eye of late with Facebook signing on to CISPA, a House bill that has now passed through and moved on to the Senate.
How is that a bad thing?
Though the tech community is not at all pleased with the powers that it gives to companies to pretty much be immune from handing over any of our private data to the government without due process. In the name of protecting against cyber threats, we want to be able to protect against them, but not in a way that gives overarching power to companies or government with our private data.
Is this an example of Facebook giving in to some of the concerns about privacy and where it stands, and trying to take a public stand on this?
I think we've all noticed Mark has a unique view on privacy, and it's one that this Facebook generation has shown to be a little unorthodox with the normal way we do things. And so a lot of us in the tech community are frustrated by this, and hopefully we'll get some change in the Senate.
All right, well, we'll look for that and we'll stay up to date on that. Speaking of Mark Zuckerberg, he, in this whole filing, does not want to focus so much on the numbers. He wants to focus on talking about where the company is headed. And a lot of people say that Facebook is born a web company and it's trying to really gather its strength in the mobile space. Are they in catch-up mode, though, when it comes to providing users with a mobile experience? I mean, the Facebook app on the iPhone, the iPad didn't really come out until fairly recently.
Yes, and you look at something like that acquisition of Instagram and you start to wonder, was the threat there, the fact that so many people are actually coming on Instagram to share those photos? They can all do it with their lovely mobile devices now. And because that was such a big draw to Facebook, it was perceived as a threat, and we see the purpose of the acquisition. I have to imagine the way mobile devices become such a bigger part of our lives and the way we see this in the investor community, there is going to be more and more iteration in that space because so many people, whether they're checking their Facebook status or checking the news, it's coming from a smartphone.
Constantly. Facebook employees are about to become millionaires, or at the very least, some very, very rich people. What happens when a startup becomes an industry bellwether and they now have to answer to shareholders? I mean, how does that change the culture over at Facebook?
I can imagine that Mark will not be running that company from a public standpoint. Internally, though, a lot of the product decisions, all that stuff will I'm sure, still go through Mark. But, in dealing with a publicly traded company, you have to deal with shareholders. And it's a very different behavior as a former CEO of a privately held startup. It's very different when you're accountable to your board than when you're accountable to the world.
Will Facebook be suffering a brain drain, you think, once those newly minted millionaires get their money?
I think every company goes through that. Google, when they had their IPO, experienced it to some extent too. But as long as you can provide interesting problems to solve, you're still going to keep around a significant amount of the talent. And, I have to say, Facebook is in a really unique position where the things that are being worked on right now could have very serious repercussions for the internet with years to come. So that could be appealing enough for lots of folks to stick around. But for the rest, I hope they invest in startups and keep the startup economy going.
Well, the job market certainly needs it, right?
Yes, indeed.